are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for inviting me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. So, I read your book, in your series, The Purrmaids. I so we're gonna be talking about the books, The Scaredy Cat
Okay,
and the A Purr-fect Pumpkin.
okay.
And so, could you tell us a bit more about yourself and the book?
Yeah, so let me start with how I even started writing for kids. It was kind of a weird journey for me. I actually thought that I was going to be a scientist. So I was doing a PhD in developmental neurobiology at Caltech when I
Yeah.
had my older daughter, and then 14 months later, I had my middle daughter. And after they were born, all of a sudden, I had all these stories that I wanted to tell them. And I also really wanted to be home with them. I didn't want to go back to grad school right away. So I wanted to be home with them. I had all these stories that I wanted to tell them. And I thought maybe other kids would like these stories too. Now, of course, at that point, I didn't actually know how to write really well for kids. So it was a
Yeah.
nice idea, but it took a lot of work. But it was after they were born that I decided to even start writing. I've been writing now for over 20 years, actually 20, almost 22 years now I've been writing for
Oh, that's a
kids.
long time, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time. It's a long time. I had a, in fact, after I had the girls, I thought maybe I would get published right away and I could read my books in their classrooms and I would be the coolest mom ever, except I didn't really realize how long it takes to get published.
Yeah.
And so I joke that I had my youngest, my son, just so I'd have a child who'd be willing to read some of my books. So
Yeah.
it's been a long time that I've been doing this, and I write all sorts of different kinds of books. I write chapter books like the Purrmaids. I write a lot of picture books. I write nonfiction. I write science books. I write all sorts of different kinds of things. And it's actually really cool that as a writer, I get to decide what stories I want to tell. Nobody tells me what I have to do.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
But I would if I were you, I would though accept suggestions.
Well, I think that it's very important. I think it's hard to accept suggestions, especially when you're writing, because when you write something, you really put your heart into it, right? And so if somebody says they don't like something that you've written, it hurts your feelings in a way that it doesn't hurt your feelings if you get something wrong on a math test, you know? And
Yeah.
so it can be hard to take other people's suggestions, but I think it's really, really important to do it because that's how you get to be a better writer, and that's how you get to tell better stories and write better books.
Yeah. How long did it take to write the book?
So each of these Purrmaids books, I've got one here, each of them takes about, I don't know, a couple months for me to write the whole first draft. And after I hand in my draft, my editor will read it and she will give me suggestions and comments and revisions to do. And then I'll go back and that'll take a couple more weeks. But before the couple months of writing, I actually spend a lot of time figuring it all out in my head, right? Like I like to know what the story is going to be kind of in my head before I start writing. So I will have, before I ever sit down at my laptop, I will have already thought through scenes that I want to write and conversations that I think that are important. So that makes it a little bit faster for me because I kind of work it out in my head to begin with instead of working it out all on paper
Like
as
an
I'm.
outline.
Yeah, but it's all in my head. Um, and I think that's because when I put it on paper or if I write it down, like I'm a perfectionist. And if I write it down, I want it to be as close to perfect as possible. But it's impossible to have a perfect idea the first time around, right? So
Yeah.
I do all that outlining in my head so I can make all the changes so that by the time I start typing, it feels a lot more perfect to me.
Mm-hmm. I'm also actually a perfectionist too,
It's
and
hard, right?
I I didn't actually. I mean, it is sort of hard because when something is messed up, like one time when I went over to um one of this people's house when we were Christmas caroling, there was this little area that was sort of a little like jungly looking to me, and I
Mhm.
just wanted to go there and clean it up. Like in my head, I was already like if literally like formulating a plan of like how I would do this and then that.
Well, you can come over to my house anytime because my house is always a mess. And if you feel like cleaning up, you are welcome. You're welcome anytime you want.
Yeah. So what inspired you to write The Scaredy Cat and a Purr-fect Pumpkin.
So, the Scaredy Cat was the first book in the series, and at that point, the publisher had asked me to write a book about cat mermaids. And they had an idea that they wanted there to be three main characters, and they knew the names. They knew the names should be Coral, Angel, and Shelley. But then I got to kind of build the rest of the world, which was really kind of cool because I started with just how do I introduce these characters? And Coral being a little bit of a scaredy cat, that really spoke to me because I'm a lot of a scaredy cat, and I am the one who like is too nervous to do things a lot of times. And so I can really imagine how it feels to be the one friend who's a little bit nervous about stuff and having two other friends who always want to jump right in. So for me, it was really easy to imagine what Coral was feeling. And so in that first book, it was about making sure we can meet everybody and get a sense of what the world is because we're humans, we're not cat mermaids, right? And so understanding what Kitten Tail Cove was going to be like and really making it real for the reader, right? Like I want it to be that when you're reading it, you can really see in your head exactly what Kitten Tail Cove looks like. So that was part of it, but then there was also the story. And I knew that even if you're a scaredy cat like me, when it's really important, you can get things done. You know what I mean? Right? Like I'm so afraid of spiders, but my daughters are even more afraid of spiders. And so if we see a spider and all three of us are screaming and running away, that doesn't help, right? So
Yeah.
when I'm with them, I have to be the brave one and I have to deal with the spider. If my son or my husband are around, luckily they can deal with the spider. But sometimes you have to be the brave one. And so I wanted the story to be about that. I wanted it to be about Coral knowing that she's a little bit scared, having her friends support her, right? Her friends aren't making fun of her for being scared. They're being supportive, but even with that, it can be hard to be brave. But when you really care about something and it's really important to you, you can find the strength to be brave. So I wanted to do that. And I really, really like that those cat sharks or those dogfish sharks, they're real animals and they really do glow in the dark. And I just thought that that would be the perfect amount of like facts, but also eerie fiction that would make the story feel really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you want to hear about the Purr-fect Pumpkin as well?
Well, yeah, but I just want to say something
Sure,
here.
of course.
So you basically like what you said, like about that, like that's what you wanted the story to be about. That's like what you sort of mean, like, do you mean like that's the theme
I
or
think it
message?
is. Yeah, that's the theme. The theme is about trusting your friends to help you, but knowing that even when you don't believe in yourself, knowing that you are stronger than maybe you think you are, right? And if you were put in a position, you can be strong.
Yeah. Could you tell us about the Purr-fect Pumpkin then?
Of course, I can tell you about the Purr-fect Pumpkin. So the Purr-fect Pumpkin, I think, is book 8 in the series. And so by that point, I had been living with these characters for a while and I kind of got to know them. And I really love puns and I love holidays. And I just thought Halloween would be a really fun holiday. And to see the Purrmaids dress up in their different outfits and how they would dress up and kind of what kind of costumes they would pick, right?
How would they
Um,
like put it on with those tails?
how do they put it on with the tails and like what kind of material do they use to make their costumes? Like the angel wings, right, are made out of palm tree fronds, right? Which is a little different than we would do, but that makes sense in the Purrmaids world. And
Yeah.
so it gave me a chance to be creative. And then if you think about it, that's another story that's a little bit about being afraid of things. And that comes back to something that I feel all the time. Like when my family wants to watch like a scary movie, I have to like pretend I have work to do or something because I can't handle watching a scary movie. And it's another place where people get a lot of pressure sometimes to do what their friends want to do, right? Because you want to be a good friend. And but it's like a different way to get over your fears and a different way to kind of deal with that. And just the fun of all the different Halloween puns, the Halloween slash Purrmaids puns that we were able to put into the story.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun as well.
Perfect is a cat as a classic.
Yeah.
And so how'd you come up with the titles?
Well, the titles are usually a team effort. So I will come up with kind of the idea for the book. Like I knew that I wanted it should be a Halloween book. I knew I wanted them to do something that looked like decorating jack-o'-lanterns, but of course, mermaids don't have pumpkins, right? So what could they use? And we ended up with these like little jellyfish that they use to decorate because it just felt really fun and like part of that world. But in terms of the title itself, I work with my editor and with my publisher, and we all kind of come together, we throw out ideas, and then we decide which of the ideas we like the most.
Yeah. So how'd you come up with the characters, Shelley, Coral, and Angel?
Well, the names I got from the publisher, and then I just started to put their personalities together and their families together based on, honestly, a lot based on people I know and the kinds of people that you meet. And like Shelley, who is very kind of particular about the way she looks, that's a lot like me. Now that I think about it, now I'm wondering if maybe they're all a little bit like me because Coral, the scaredy cat, is a lot like me. And Shelley, the perfectionist who wants to always look perfect, is a lot like me. And Angel, who likes to make her own rules, is also a lot like me, but they're bits of my children, little bits of that. And just with these books, one thing that was really important was to show real friendships, right? And in real friendships, most of the time you get along, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have fights. Sometimes you have fights over stupid things that don't even matter. Sometimes there are misunderstandings. Sometimes there are things you're too nervous to tell your friends. I wanted the friendships to be real, so I just really tried to make them. I tried to make the Purrmaids as human as I could, if that makes sense. I tried to make it so that it felt like the readers could really understand how
Relate?
the Purrmaids were feeling, so that if they were struggling, say you were having a fight with your best friend and you didn't know what to do, I'd like you to be able to read a Purrmaids book and kind of see how Coral and Shelley and Angel deal with it, and
Yeah.
maybe that'll help you with your own life.
Yeah, there are a lot of books on that. Like, well, not really purpose. I don't think a lot of them, I don't think they're purposely that, and the whole story isn't about that. But there are a lot of stories. Well, there is one that's fully dedicated to like just fighting and making up.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What message or theme would you uh, want people to learn from A Perfect Pumpkin? Because we already talked about the one in the Scaredy Cat.
I think the Purr-fect Pumpkin is about, I think it's about being open-minded, right? And being willing to try new things. Like Coral is afraid of the haunted house, right? And she does it because her friends want to go. But she very easily could have just said no, and I'll just wait here for you. But she kept her mind open and she was willing to try something new, and it turned out really cool, right? When she finally did try it. And a lot of times I think we tell ourselves we're not going to like something and we don't even try it because we just know we don't like it, even though we've never tried it before. So I think the theme there is keeping an open mind. And again, it's about trust and friendship and remembering that none of us do anything in life by ourselves, right? Every time we accomplish anything, we have our family, we have our friends, we have our classmates, we have our teachers, we have all sorts of people that we rely on. And so every book kind of deals with that part, right? Like working together and getting support. But this book is about keeping an open mind about things you think you may not like.
Mm-hmm. So if you could give one piece of advice to kids who want to become authors or authors who are authors already, what would it be?
One piece of advice, that's hard. What's the best piece of advice? I think understanding that your work, your story can always be better, which is why, as we talked about, getting feedback, getting suggestions from people, it's really, really important. Your work can always be better. A book is never really done. A book is just published, if that makes sense, right? I could go back and I could read through the Purrmaids books again, and I could find places that, oh, maybe I could say this a little bit
Yeah, I
differently.
mean, like you got better now because you already published that book.
Yeah, but like I could go read the story again and say, oh, if I had a chance, I could change this sentence, or maybe I would change this scene a little bit, because stories can always get better. The trick is when you're trying to be published is you want to get it to the place where it's good enough to be published. but being open to people's suggestions is always going to make you a better writer. And the other thing, I know you asked for one piece of advice, but I'll give you another piece of advice. The other piece of
As
advice
many as you
is
want to try.
the more you write, the better you get, even if what you write is not something you're happy with, right? There are lots of days that kids might be writing and they may be thinking they're having a bad writing day, right? Well, guess what? As a professional writer, I have more bad writing days than I have good writing days. And the trick is, even the bad writing days make you better at writing, right? Because even recognizing when you've written something that isn't very good, think about how much better you've gotten at writing to recognize that. Because think back to like when you first started writing, you didn't know the difference between a good sentence and a bad sentence, right? You didn't know how to
I did
spell
not.
things correctly.
Yeah.
So the
And I
more
used to
you
write
do,
things like the cat has hat or something.
exactly, right? And so you know now that that's not the best sentence you could write, which means you've already gotten to be better. You've learned more about writing and you know how to recognize it. So the more you write, the better you'll get. And it's okay if you have a bad writing day. As long as you keep writing, you will get to a good writing day, I promise.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a lot of good pieces of advice. And so can you tell us some interesting or memorable things about or memorable experiences that might have come from your life that were in the book?
That were in the book. Well, I'm terrified of haunted houses, so I don't go in haunted houses. I am not as open-minded as Coral is, and I just won't do it. I did do it once in Disneyland, and someone jumped out at me and like touched my face, and I screamed like a little baby, and I ran out of the house, and I was so mad, and that was the last haunted house I ever went into. So there are things like that throughout all the books. There are little parts of things that I've experienced. For example, in Purrmaids 13, they go and they see some flamingos. And I actually went on vacation a couple years ago to Aruba, and there was this beach where there were all these flamingos that just hung out on the beach. And I just thought they were just the most awesome birds, and they were so beautiful and everything. And so I put in an adventure with flamingos in that story. And then in another one of the Purrmaids books, they meet a manatee who gets stuck, going through a tunnel. And manatees are mammals, and so they can't just be underwater forever. They have to come up for air. So they had to really like make sure this manatee could get free. They had to work together and free her. And I love manatees, and whenever I go to Florida, I like to go see them. And it's something I think about, that manatees
Yeah,
can
where
get.
do you live?
I live in New Jersey.
Oh, actually, the funny thing is, just last week I went on a trip to New York and New Jersey, and I do live in Florida. So, if you could travel back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? Like,
And I could give
like,
myself one piece of advice. What I think I would tell myself is be a little bit more like a manatee and don't be so critical. Just relax. And that if you are doing the things you need to do, you're going to get to where you're supposed to be. And just being stressed about it and being anxious and worrying and crying and yelling and all those things, that's actually not going to change.
I
Yeah.
worry a lot.
I do too. It's a hard thing to remember, but as it turns out, worrying doesn't change much at all. It
It
just
does
makes
not.
it harder for us. So
Exactly. I don't know why human bodies worry. That's just,
I think it's interesting that some of us worry a lot and then others of us don't worry at all about anything, even though we might be in the same situation. And of course, that gives me like another level of anxiety, right? Like, why am
yeah,
I worried? But my family isn't worried. They see this too, right? So, but
yeah,
just remembering that advice, I would not only give my past self, I'd give myself today as well. Remember to like not
yeah.
stress too much. The things that are supposed to happen are going to happen.
True. I shouldn't be worried about natural disasters. I shouldn't be worried about getting buried underwater. I shouldn't be getting, well, I'm not going to
The
go on to
only
that
thing you should be
list.
worried about that's a legitimate worry is that you might be eaten by a bear, because I worry about that all the time. So I live in a part of New Jersey where we get bears walking around town sometimes. And if I get an alert on my phone saying there's a bear, I will tell my kids, you guys have to figure out how to get home from school by yourselves, because I'm not leaving the house because a bear could eat me. Or sometimes I go to this writing workshop or writing retreat that is out in the woods in Pennsylvania, and there are bears around, and I never walk around the retreat by myself. I always walk with someone else, and I try to make sure that other person is a little bit slower than me so that if a bear sees us, I can outrun the person and the bear won't get me.
Yeah, that's a good tactic. Yeah. What do you enjoy doing for fun other than reading or writing?
I love to travel. I love to
I do
travel.
too.
I like to go to, there are so many beautiful places in the world, right? And I want to see
Yeah.
as many of them as I can.
Have you
So
been to have you been to London or Switzerland?
I lived in London for a year.
A year? Wow, that's a long
Yeah.
time.
I lived in London for a year, like 15 years ago. But yeah, I've been to London, I've been to Paris many times, I've been to Italy, I've been to Greece, I've been to the Caribbean, I've been to lots of places, but there's still so many more places. But I love to travel. I also really love my dog Roxy, who is a giant Instagram star. She has 13,000 followers on Instagram, so we always have to be making content for Roxy's Instagram. And this past summer, I got to combine travel with Roxy. We actually took Roxy to France with us for 2 weeks. And we took her to the Eiffel Tower and we put her in a beret and we gave her a croissant and we let her eat her croissant in front of the Eiffel Tower. And then we took her to all sorts of castles around the French countryside and put her in this big gown and took photos of her. So I like to travel and I love my dog.
Yeah.
I love my family too, but I definitely love my dog.
Yeah. So, are you planning to write any more books?
I am always writing more books. So I have a couple books coming out, a couple picture books coming out, one called Cats in Construction Hats, and you'll never guess. It's about cats doing construction, wearing construction hats. And then I have another picture book coming out next year called Alpaca Goes Back to School, and you'll never guess. It's about an alpaca that goes back to school. I have another picture book called Hippopotamus, about a messy hippopotamus and what he has to do when he makes a hippopotamus.
That I wouldn't have guessed.
So, and then there's Purrmaids 15 will come out this year, and it's got an Olympic theme because it's the Summer Olympics, and so
Olympics. I
the
wonder how they do
Purrmaids
it
will
all.
have, they're going to have a swimnastics competition with a special guest judge who's named Salmon Biles, who's coming to Kittentail Cove to judge their swimnastics. So yeah, and I have another
And let
chapter
me
book.
guess, Coral, Shelley, and Angel are in the gymnastic contest.
The whole class is in, well,
Oh,
it's actually like an Olympics themed field day. And so there's some swimnastics, but there's other events as well. And then I have another series of chapter books called Cheese and Quackers, about a duck named Quackers and a lamb named Cheese. And they're kind of an odd couple, right? They're not really the same, but they end up being roommates at summer camp. And so it's about their friendship and the hijinks that ensue. So there's a lot of books that are going on.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this interview today. So, good luck on your further books.